Welcome to a CNY Wrestling podcast. This is part 3 of the 2016 to 2017 Class A previews.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the third and final part to the 2016-2017 Section 3 Class A previews. I appreciate you guys checking out the first two parts and for coming back to watch this video, and I'm excited to wrap up Class A while still on schedule with how and when I wanted to upload these videos. For this part, we will be discussing the final three teams in Class A, Oswego, Watertown, and Whitesboro, and we will also be discussing a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about. After finishing up the team previews when we finish with Whitesboro, I want to go over my Class A team rankings one more time, and then I want to take a look into into who the best pound-for-pound wrestlers are in Class A. It was fun and interesting to try and figure out how the teams and wrestlers ranked doing this preview, and I thought it would be a cool addition to the end of each class-specific preview to look back at the team rankings and look at the pound-for-pound rankings in terms of the wrestlers within the class. So I hope we can do that here with this video. Without further ado, I want to jump right in to part 3 of the Class A previews. We'll start off with the Oswego Buccaneers. I think that it is safe to say that junior Stephen DeMong is the future of Oswego wrestling. And that is assuming there is a future for Oswego wrestling. Earlier this offseason, there were rumors that turned into reports about Oswego High School being forced to cut a huge part of their athletic program. And it was said that wrestling would be one of the sports that wouldn't survive. It was a huge blow to the section as a whole to hear that. And it seems, though, after a $150,000 grant was awarded to the school, and possibly some other funds, like on the CNY Wrestling homepage, there was a Save Oswego Wrestling Fund that you could donate to. It seems like those worries have eased and that there will be an Oswego wrestling program for this upcoming season. That's a great sign, especially considering that I don't think Oswego fielded a varsity football team this year. That might have just been because of numbers in terms of players. But it's a great sign that they appear to be ready to host a wrestling program because of what Oswego can bring to Class A. Case in point, the Bucks were just a handful of wins away last year from being a top 10 team at the Section 3 tournament. They were 11th, add in a pin here or there, a close match from turning that from a loss to a win, and they could have been a top 10 team. DeMong was a big part of that. The 160-pounder placed at the tournament for the second February in a row. This time, he improved on a fourth-place finish from his freshman year to a runner-up spot last season as a sophomore, earlier this year in February. That trip to the sectional finals, which followed a dramatic 9-8 win in the semifinals, is likely to have DeMong primed to make another run at the title this year. Oswego did lose two all-section wrestlers, though, to graduation, and while that's going to hurt them, they still have DeMong and Brian LeBron, who will be trying to join DeMong in keeping Oswego afloat in Class A in the tough Freedom American League itself. We've talked a lot about classes, not so much about leagues, and the Freedom American League is a tough league, and Oswego is going to need DeMong and LeBron to try and be successful in both of those. LeBron is just a junior, and he seems like he was improving last year. He took a 5th in Class A, and then he unfortunately dropped a 6-4 decision in the pigtail round of the Section 3 tournament. And so he was bumped right then. That's another example of how close Oswego was to being a top 10 team. Say LeBron wins that adds a couple more points to their team total. Maybe he wins another match within the quarterfinals or the first round of wrestlebacks. And then there you go. Oswego could have been a top 10 team. LeBron was that close to helping the team out and getting himself closer to being on the podium. So when considering both DeMong and LeBron and what else Oswego has on the roster, I have them fitting in 8th place, which is where they were last year. And so even with the loss of those two all-section wrestlers, one of them being Zach Caruso, who I did an interview with that I will leave a link to in the description. Even with the loss of Caruso and another all-section senior, I think Oswego will be back in 8th place, and so that keeps them out of the cellar. and I think DeMong is an early sectional favorite. Whatever weight he goes to, he's going to be a top-ranked contender for the whole winter. LeBron, he was close to being successful in the tournament last year, and so this year, I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a way onto the podium. So those are good news. That's good news for Oswego. The fact that they seem to be ready to have a wrestling program is good news itself, and so that's how I would wrap up the preview for Oswego and take us into the preview for the Watertown Cyclones. Watertown was quite the curious case last year in Section 3. The Cyclones appeared to have 3 seniors ready to be top contenders among the D1 side of the section. But injuries seemingly took 2 of them out before we could reach February, and consequently, all of the expectations fell onto Deshaun Williams. Now, Williams was not phased at all. He did everything he could and then some. He won a Class A title, a Section 3 title, and went 2-2 at the New York State Tournament, which I believe left him a match away from placing, which would have been awesome for the Watertown program and D1 itself. And him going 2-2 is still awesome. But Williams has graduated, though, along with the other 2 seniors, who were Zach Hunt and Nick Lavin. And so Watertown's now going to have to look towards the future, and they're not going to have to look any further than sophomore Spencer Lavin, who had an unreal season in many ways last year as a freshman. First off, just take a look at some of the scores from Lavin's matches from last year. 20 matches were within 3 points. Lavin went 7-13 in those matches, and that doesn't include 6 other matches that were decided by 6 points or less. In those, he was 2-4. So in close matches, I have him as 9-17. That's 26 matches that could have basically swung one way or the other, depending on a few moves here or there, The bottom line is that you can basically expect to see 6 minutes of close wrestling when Lavin takes the mat. And I think that after another year of experience for the young guy, like I said, he's only a sophomore, maybe he can turn half of those close losses into victories. And that can certainly be a big factor throughout the regular season, and especially considering the postseason. Now, in the postseason, last February, Lavin was very impressive. He took 5th in Class A and then matched that with a 5th in Section 3 at 113 pounds, which was no joke of a bracket by any means. And so I'm expecting him, especially if he can turn those close losses into wins, which a lot of guys can do throughout getting more experience, he could be a contender for, a top 4 spot in the section, which would be great for Watertown, especially considering the loss of those 3 seniors, which I think is going to hit them pretty hard. I don't think that Lavin's going to be the only name to talk about when it comes to the postseason for Watertown, because the Cyclones, they have a bunch of other sophomores who could improve with a little more time and potentially sneak their way into the sectional tournament through Class A. But I think Lavin is the main guy to watch for on the team. And I think that with that crop of sophomores, Watertown has a great upside in terms of their future. And so while things may not look great right now, if Lavin can do well this year, stay healthy, and they can get some other good performances out of other guys coming up, Watertown's going to be just fine. They're going to be just fine for this year and the next couple of years. So while I have them 9th in my early Class A rankings, I still think they have a great upside. And like I said, Lavin's going to be a guy to watch. He seems to be able to give anyone a close match. 113, like I said, was no joke, so it shows how talented he was against the best competition, considering he was 5th in the class and then the section. So with that, now that we're done with Oswego and Watertown, we're going to finish with one of the teams I'm more interested in watching for this upcoming season, the Whitesboro Warriors. Last year, when I was doing the Class A previews, I talked about how I thought ESM was really going to start turning a corner and get out of like a little rebuilding period. Whitesboro necessarily wasn't rebuilding, but I think their future for this upcoming season is similar in that it's very bright. It's hard not to believe that when the 2 highest returning placers on the team are sophomores. And then on top of that, there's 2 seniors that also place in Section 3 returning for the team. The sophomores are Jeff Robinson and Matt Blum. The seniors are Dominic Della Posta and Aiden Nimi. And talking about Robinson and Blum, they really exploded onto the Class A and Section 3 scene last year. in the beginning of the season, they quickly established themselves as one of the more daunting 1-2 punches at the start of a lineup in all of Section 3. Robinson was at 99 pounds, Blum was at 106. I think they came out of the gate firing on all cylinders, really, and then they both managed to place every tournament they participated in. And it was no walk in the park to do that either, because Robinson was part of a talented 99-pound class that featured people that we've already talked about, like Luca Pirizzolo from Auburn, Thomas Hughes from Fulton, and Logan Patterson from Indian River. And then Blum was in a stacked 106-pound class that featured Class A guys like Donovan Marriott from ESM, Caleb Carrion from Fulton, and a lot of other Class AA guys that we'll talk about in future videos. And despite being in those tough classes, they managed to both take fourth at their weight classes. So that shows the talent that they have at such an early age. De La Posta and Nimi, they also had to battle their way onto the podiums during the last February. De La Posta placed at the Class A tournament for what was the third year in a row. Nimi took third at the Class A tournament, but this was a year after he went just 2-10 and didn't even wrestle in the postseason. Wasn't even participating in the Class A tournament. So for him to go from not even wrestling at the tournament to taking third was really impressive. And then for him to go from not even wrestling at the class tournament to taking fifth at the sectional tournament a week later is even more impressive. He did that at 145 pounds. De La Posta, he battled to sixth at 126. That was a tough bracket also. And he, I think, is one of the better pound-for-pound wrestlers on the team, despite not having the highest placing last year at sectionals compared to Robinson, Blum, and Nimi. But, looking at all four of those guys, they're going to be back to lead the Warriors to more victories, more tournament points. And if that, doesn't convince you enough about Whitesboro's immediate future, Deshaun Yerby is a senior. I haven't even talked about him yet, but he had a 15-win season last year and was fourth at the Center States tournament and Class A. He didn't place the sectionals, but he still showed plenty of improvement from the year before and had some other great tournament showings. So he's going to join the four guys that I talked about: Robinson, Blum, De La Posta, and Nimi. And then you're going to throw in Yerby in there. And like I said, the future looks bright for Whitesboro this upcoming season. With that, I have them just, like I said, they're similar to ESM, I think, and I have them just a spot under ESM. They're going to complete my Class A rankings in fourth. That's a great spot for them, I think, and that completes my Class A rankings, like I said. And now I would look to get into an overview of the Class A preseason team rankings and some Class A preseason pound-for-pound rankings in terms of the wrestlers. To do this, like you've seen throughout these videos, I've made my own Class A team rankings, and you just saw the finalized version of those. And then I made my own Class A pound-for-pound rankings, usually using the top 10. I found out a top 10, and then I also gave 2 honorable mentions. To find out pound-for-pound rankings, you take a look at all the exceptional wrestlers within the class, and then you imagine them basically as who would win or who would be the best if they were all the same weight. Because if you imagine a guy like Thomas Hughes from Fulton, he's 99 pounds, and try to compare him to Jared Crusidi of 285, obviously you'd be like, oh, well, Crusidi is going to win because he is heavier. But if you look at it at a pound-for-pound standpoint, it's basically imagining if they were the same weight, who would win, who is the better wrestler in that sense. And so that's how you make the pound-for-pound rankings. I made my own set of rankings. I made my own set of team rankings. And just to get a second opinion, because I believe 2 heads are always better than 1, I consulted someone else to make their own Class A team and pound-for-pound rankings. That someone is SectionIIIWrestler, who you may have seen within the forums page, and you may have also realized is Isaiah Brookman. Isaiah Brookman wrestled at Cortland. I also did an interview with him during my CNY Wrestling interview series, and I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. He's super knowledgeable, really a helpful guy in any questions I have when it comes to wrestling, and so I knew I could turn to him to help me make sure that I have these team and pound-for-pound rankings as best as I could. Once I contacted him and he gave me his rankings, I combined them to come up with the finalized rankings, basically. So I took, say, I ranked this team first and he ranked that team second, then their total would be 3. And then they would be ahead of a team that I ranked second and he ranked third because their total would be 5. So it would go in that order. Like the total rankings that we have for that team and that wrestler, we'd add them up and we'd sort it out like that. And that's how I came across this finalized version of the team in pound for pound rankings. So now we'll get into those. We'll start with the team rankings. Both me and Section 3 Wrestler had Fulton at the top of the class, and we both also had Indian River in second and ESM in third. So we had those. Those are the top 3 teams in Class A in the preseason. Fulton, Indian River, and ESM. They're the top third in Class A. We come across a tie for 4th and 5th with New Hartford and Whitesboro. I thought Whitesboro was 4th and New Hartford was 5th. He thought that New Hartford was 4th and Whitesboro was 5th. So instead of trying to determine whose opinion means more or whatever, we're just going to say that they tied for 4th in the preseason class rankings. Auburn, they come out in 6th. I personally had them 6th. He had them 7th. They add up to come in 6th ahead of Watertown, who he actually had in 6th while I had them in 9th. Watertown comes in 7th then in the finalized rankings. And then Oswego and Carthage, we have another tie for 8th. We both had Oswego for 8th actually, but then I had Carthage in 7th. He had them in 9th, and so they both add up to 16. We'll call that a tie for 8th. That's how it is for the final team rankings in Class A. Now that we get into the final pound for pound rankings, I want to give you the list of wrestlers that we considered while making these rankings. We went through every notable wrestler from every team that I mentioned in these previews, picked out a top 12, and then made a list, a top 10 list, and then 2 honorable mentions. The wrestlers involved were Stephen DeMong of Oswego. Of New Hartford, we had Lucas King, Ian McKenna, and Dan Turney. Of Fulton, we had Jared Crucity, Thomas Hughes, Caleb Carrion, and Wyatt Willis. Of Indian River, we had Stefan Colbert and Dylan Ashwood. From Carthage, we had Caleb Knoll. And then from ESM, we had Jeff Loader. Now, I don't think I left anybody out. Those were the 12 wrestlers that we consulted. In doing so, the number 1 pound for pound wrestler in Class A that we came up with is Caleb Knoll of Carthage. I had him second, he had him first, and with that, Caleb Knoll becomes the preseason number 1 pound for pound wrestler in Class A. Ian McKenna comes in the number 2 spot. I had him first, he had him third, and so Ian McKenna will be in the number 2 spot. And then it was all very close with the top 3 guys. Jared Crucity comes in third. I had him third. Section 3 Wrestler had him second. So those are the top 3 that we had within the top 10. Coming in 4th is Stefan Colbert out of Indian River. We both had him in a pretty similar spot. I had him 4th, he had him 5th. Wyatt Willis then comes in 5th. Despite neither of us having him in that spot, I had him 6th, he had him 4th. That adds up to 10, which is 1 point ahead of Colbert's teammate, Dylan Ashwood. I had Ashwood cracking the top 5, and then Section 3 Wrestler had him missing by 1. And so those 3 were very close as well. And so that makes Colbert 4, Willis 5, and Ashwood 6. We then had a 3-way tie for 7th place, essentially. We had 3 guys combined with 16 points. Stephen DeMong of Oswego, we both actually, just like we had Oswego, we both had him ranked in 8th. And then Lucas King, I had 7th. He had 9th, which makes 16. Jeff Loader, I had 9th. And then he had 7th, so that makes 16. Basically, we'll call that a 3-way tie for 7th. You can rank them out however which way you want, 7, 8, and 9. And we also had a 3-way tie for the number 10 spot. And so our top 10 list has become a little blurred, you could say. But we both did make lists of a top 10 with 2 honorable mentions. We'll just make this a 3-way tie for 10th then, and then, you can decide who fits into the top 10 and who are the 2 honorable mentions, because this is how we came up with it with our system, and they were tied. We had Caleb Carrion, Thomas Hughes, and Dan Turney all tie for 10th. I had Carrion 10th, and then Hughes and Turney as my honorable mentions. he had Turini 10th, and then Hughes and Kurian as his honorable mentions. And that creates our list of pound for pound wrestlers in Class A. That's our opinion, and that's gonna take us towards the end now of this Class A preview. That's really gonna wrap it up. We covered all nine teams in Class A: Auburn, Carthage, ESM, Fulton, Indian River, and New Hartford, and now Oswego, Watertown, and Whitesboro. We created a team rankings for the class and also a pound for pound rankings for the class, which we just went over. I had a great time previewing Class A. I like Division 1. Section 3 wrestler, he's admittedly a little more of a D2 guy, but he really did his research in making his rankings, and so that helped out a lot. Just like I said, I think two heads are better than one. But that is going to wrap it up for us in terms of Class A. Coming on October 13th will be the start of the Class AA previews. We're going to start with Baldwinsville, CBA JD, that's a combined team, and then Central Square. The heavy hitters of Class AA are going to be right off the bat, so you're going to want to check that out in 2 days on October 13th. Look for that upload, the link to be in the forums. Like I always do, I appreciate you guys checking this one out. The Class A previews have completed. I hope you enjoyed them. Check them out as many times as you want on the CNY Wrestling YouTube page, and I hope to see you all next time.
Check out interviews with Isaiah Brookman, also known as Section 3 Wrestler, in the forums, and with Oswego alumni Zach Caruso as he talks about the state of Oswego wrestling from a couple of months ago. Check back on October 13th for part 1 of the Class AA previews.